Good afternoon. Oh, thank you. We're used to that here at North Parish. Welcome to Stories of Hope, Acts of Faith for Local Heroes. I'm the Reverend Lee Blumel, and I'm the minister here at North Parish Unitarian Universalist Congregation. And I welcome you to our 1836 meeting house on this cold but beautiful day. We are all in for a wonderful and thought-provoking play which will depict key contributions of four amazing African-American individuals from the 19th century who, despite insurmountable odds, heroically fought for the most basic of human rights and humanity for American women, men, and children descended from those kidnapped from Africa and brought to this land in bondage. The heroes depicted have ties to the Merrimack Valley and also Middlesex and Suffolk counties. You will hear how their actions, voices, triumphs, and the repeated non-fulfillment of equity and true freedom were felt and heard across the nation. As we know, African-American history is American history. Following the play, we would love to hear from you. We have planned a 15-minute discussion, and we'll ask three questions. Which of the historical figures spoke to you and why? How does this information change your perspective on our community culture? And what does it call you to do? And those questions can be found in your program on page 2 if you want to mull them over at some point during the performance. I'd like to share with you a little bit about the amazing group of individuals who serve on the North Andover African American History Committee. The group is in its 4th year of a collaboration between community members, the North Parish Church, the town of North Andover, and the North Andover Historical Society. This year, the group has expanded programming beyond the traditional Black History Month of February to include 2 events in March. The group has had 2 events in February in addition to today's performance, and there will be another event with the amazing Dr. Gilks on March 16th. The committee will also participate in the 2025 Andover Juneteenth celebration, which is a collaboration between the town of Andover and Andover Baptist Church, and is scheduled for June 6th. All events can be found on the back of the program. On the walls, you will notice banners, which are replicas of those on the lampposts around the North Andover Town Common, right across the street and in front of the meeting house. There are 16 of them, and they highlight the lives of African Americans with local, regional, or state ties. The images are created by the talented artists at Elevated Thought in Lawrence, which is an art and social justice organization founded by Marquis Victor, who grew up in North Andover. Today's program has been funded by a grant from the Mass Humanities. The funds will also be used to create programming and school curriculum to further bring light to the lives and stories of African Americans with ties to Essex County and eastern Massachusetts, people whose influence shaped history in the pivotal decades of the late 19th and early 20th century. The Expanding Massachusetts Stories grant offers financial assistance for projects that collect, interpret, and/or share narratives about the Commonwealth with an emphasis on the voices and experiences that have gone unrecognized or have been excluded from public conversation. We are grateful to be a recipient. Just a quick few housekeeping items before we get started. If you need any assistance at all during the event, find one of our volunteers who are wearing the name tags on red lanyards. There are emergency exits both at the front and the back of the sanctuary. I'm very sorry to announce that our elevator, in a very timely manner, broke down this weekend, which means, unfortunately, to get to the accessible restrooms, you will have to go back outside the front doors, down the ramp around the sidewalk here to this door. There are additional restrooms if you exit the back of the sanctuary. Go downstairs and ushers can tell you how to find that. We do ask you to please silence your cell phones and any other beeping devices before the performance begins. Thank you for coming this afternoon. We are all in for a real treat. I'm delighted to be here, and I'm going to turn it over now to our guest conductor, Minister Melvin Murphy, and the Higher Praise Gospel Choir. Thank you.
Amen. Thank you. Sorry for the delay. We still have 2 altos, but we're going to go ahead and sing anyhow. We're very happy to be here. Always happy to be out here in North Andover. This is the Higher Praise, a very small number, but we're here to sing and hopefully uplift you. Little song I wrote years ago called Witness. That we're trying to find a witness. Real quick, just before we sing, I'm sorry. This is going to buy me a little time, but also give me a chance to make a quick announcement. Every year we usually do a musical play, and last year we did Jigging at the Jug. It was a jazz, old school play. And so we're doing it again at the Strand Theater in Boston, September 6th. I think you have cards. I'm not sure if they passed them out. Yeah. Oh yeah, there you go. All right, yeah, put them to use. We think that it's a family show. You won't be embarrassed by anything, but it's a fun show, very inspirational as well. And so we're asking for your support. Come out and see these amazing actors and actresses and singers, and dancers. I can't dance, I used to. I need to bathe in Epsom salt after I dance. Song says, witness, our other two altos are here. Let's clap for them as they come. Come on.
Witness, Give him another round of applause. Charlotte Fortin and Josephine St. Pierre Ruffin's most important activism spanned several decades, from the mid-1850s to the mid-1890s. And during these 4 decades, African Americans experienced profound social, political, demographic, and economic change. The late antebellum era, the years preceding the Civil War, simultaneously saw the growing influence of the abolitionist movement and the entrenched power of the slave owners. In 1855, Frederick Douglass publishes My Bondage, My Freedom, the second of 3 autobiographies which details the horrors and inhumanity of slavery and garnered international readership. 2 years later, in 1857, the U.S. Supreme Court rendered its decision in the Dred Scott versus Sanford case and declared that a free Negro of the African race whose ancestors were brought to this country and sold as slaves is not a citizen within the meaning of the Constitution of the United States. Now, when the Civil War begins in 1861, it initially was not a war to end slavery. But as African American men and women joined the Union cause, the war became one to restore the Union and abolish slavery, especially with the 1863 Emancipation Proclamation, which freed those slaves in rebellious Confederate states. Slaves in Delaware, Kentucky, Maryland, and Missouri were enslaved until the 13th Amendment was ratified in 1865. Even with the Union victory, the Emancipation Proclamation, and the 13th Amendment, Black people still were not citizens of the United States. It was not until the 14th Amendment was ratified in 1868 that African Americans became citizens of the nation that their ancestors helped build. The 13th Amendment abolished chattel slavery. The 14th Amendment grants citizenship to former slaves. The 15th Amendment of 1870 gives Black men the right to vote. And these 3 amendments are commonly called the Reconstruction Amendments because they were passed during the Reconstruction era, the period between 1865 and 1877, wherein white and Black politicians and federal agencies attempted to reconstruct the economies and the social and political institutions of Southern states to include Black people. During Reconstruction, Black families attempted to reunite with loved ones that had been sold away, negotiate labor contracts with plantation owners, and learn to read. As slaves, Blacks were denied educational opportunities. Now, as free people, African Americans were determined to get an education. Adults and children, old and young, went to schools established by Northern missionaries, reformers, and teachers. Many worked long hours on plantations and went to school at night because they understood the ability to read and write as a symbol of freedom. Those who were intellectually gifted attended one of the Black colleges that were established in the South during Reconstruction. Fisk University in Nashville, Tennessee, opened in 1866. Howard University was established in Washington, D.C. in 1867, as was Morgan College in Baltimore, Maryland, and Morehouse College in Atlanta, Georgia. These centers of learning were crucial to Black intellectual development, trained teachers, and continue to be centers of learning in the 21st century. Throughout the 19th century, from Virginia to East Texas, the South's economy was largely an agricultural one. Land ownership provided wealth, prestige, and political power. While some Black farmers owned their land, the vast majority of Black farmers did not. And with no land to call their own, many Black families had no choice but to become sharecroppers. They worked the land of cash-strapped white landholders in exchange for shares of the crop during harvest season. Sharecropping was an exploitative economic system that kept Black sharecroppers indebted to white landowners for generations. The sharecropping system and the rise of white terrorist groups like the Ku Klux Klan, the Knights of the White Camellia, and the Palefaces led some Blacks to leave the South. Perhaps the most notable were the exodusters, Black migrants from Arkansas, Alabama, Mississippi, Louisiana, and Texas, who, led by Benjamin Pap Singleton, a former slave, moved to Kansas to escape the racial hierarchy of the South. Others moved to cities in northern states and points west: Boston, Chicago, New York, and Philadelphia. By 1880, the Black population outside of the South reached 1.5 million. However, most formerly enslaved Blacks and their offspring, close to 6 million, remained in the South and saw Reconstruction end in 1877, with their treasonous former slave owners and white supremacists gaining power and influence in state and federal government. When the Reconstruction era ended, the nadir began. The nadir from the mid to late 1870s to the 1930s was characterized by a deterioration in race relations for Blacks. Southern whites rewrote state constitutions to reduce or eliminate the Black vote. And legal and extra-legal violence was used to control African Americans. Jim Crow became the order of the day. Jim Crow was a system of laws and customs that enforced racial apartheid and disfranchisement and affected the daily lives of Blacks in the public sphere for almost 75 years. In 1857, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled that Blacks were not citizens. In 1896, with the Plessy versus Ferguson case, they ruled that Blacks were citizens, but not equal to whites. Freedom's first and second generation faced almost insurmountable odds. But as we will hear through the stories of Charlotte Fortin and Josephine St. Pierre Ruffin, African Americans never stopped resisting and organized to improve their lives and Black communities throughout the nation. I end with a note about historical racial nomenclature. The historical figures discussed this evening lived in different times, and they used terms like colored and Negro to describe themselves and members of their communities as appropriate for their times. There's no need to fall over the phrases, or trip over the color line, if you will. After all, we are examining the contributions of Black people in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. As appropriate for our times, we use African American, Black American, or Black to refer to the participants in or descendants of African diasporas who live in the United States.
Charlotte Louisa Bridge Fortin was born in 1837 in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, at the home of her comparatively wealthy grandparents, who were African American activists. Although her mother died when she was only 3 years old, Lottie, as she was known, was surrounded by strong Black presence and especially strong Black women in her youth. Philadelphia's growing racism, though, drove some members of the family, including the activist Aunt Harriet Fortin Purvis and Uncle Robert Purvis, to Philadelphia's suburbs and beyond. It also eventually convinced her father to send Fortin to the Higgins School in Salem, Massachusetts in 1853. October 23rd, 1854, Salem, Massachusetts.
I will spare no effort to prepare myself well for the responsible duties of a teacher and to live for the good I can do for my oppressed and suffering fellow creatures.
During her time in Massachusetts, she began her well-known diaries in earnest, began to seek publications for her poetry, and became fully enmeshed in the abolitionist circles surrounding Boston. Her poems to her classmate at the Salem Normal School appeared in The Liberator, a weekly abolitionist newspaper published by William Lord Garrison. That appealed to the moral conscience of its readers, urging them to demand immediate freeing of the slaves and also promoted women's rights.
In the earnest path of duty, with the high hopes in heart sincere, we, to useful lives aspiring, daily meet to labor here. No vain dreams of earthly glory urge us onward to explore far extending realms of knowledge with their rich and varied store. But with hope of aiding others, gladly we perform our part, nor forget the mind while storing. We must educate the heart. Teach it hatred of oppression, truest love of God and man. Thus, our high and holy calling may accomplish his great plan. Not the great and gifted only, he appoints to do his will, but each one, however lowly, has a mission to fulfill. Knowing this, toil we unwearied, with true hearts and purpose high. We would win a wreath immortal, whose bright flowers ne'er fade and die.
After her graduation from Salem Normal, Fortin spent 2 years as a teacher at Salem Epps Grammar School. But ill health, headaches, respiratory problems, and occasional depression led her to her resignation in 1858. Recuperating in Philadelphia and also traveling occasionally to Massachusetts, Fortin continued her diary writing. Fortin taught again in Massachusetts during parts of 1859 and 1860, but her health again limited these efforts. The family's financial fortunes had also weakened considerably. Still, on the eve of the Civil War, her family's commitment to public service had not changed, nor had her own. When Union troops seized possession of the islands off the coast of South Carolina and began setting up schools for the newly freed slaves in the initial years of the war, Fortin, acting on part of the advice of poet John Greenleaf Whittier, applied to work there as a teacher. After she was turned down, likely because of her race, by the Boston Education Commission, later the New England Freedmen Aid Society, Philadelphia's Port Royal Relief Association assigned her to St. Helena Island in the late 1862, and she became the first Black teacher to serve there. Along with school head Laura Town and fellow teacher Ellen Murray, Fortin helped teach massive day and evening in basic literacy, mathematics, and civics, punctuated by discussions of past Black leaders and accomplishments. Fortin's interactions with the newly freed constantly reminded her, sometimes stingingly, of the differences between her relatively privileged upbringing in the North and the realities of the slave South.
The first day at school was rather trying. Most of my children were very small and consequently restless. Some were too young to learn the alphabet. These little ones were brought to school because the older children, in whose care their parents leave them while at work, could not come without them. We were therefore willing to have them come. Although small, they seemed to have discovered the secret perpetual motion and tried one's patience. It was a good day. But after some days of positive, though not severe treatment, order was brought out of chaos, and I found but little difficulty in managing and quieting the tiniest and most restless spirits. I never before saw children so eager to learn, although I had several years' experience in the New England schools. Coming to school is a constant delight and recreation to them. They come here as other children go to play. The older ones, during the summer, work in the fields from early morning until 11 or 12 o'clock, and then come into school after their hard toil in the hot sun, as bright and as anxious to learn as ever.
Charlotte Fortin worked in the Sea Islands until May 1864, when her health failed again. Her efforts aided countless among the newly freed, and the letters she wrote to the Liberator alerted readers to the Sea Islands' efforts and were reprinted in Black newspapers as far away as San Francisco. Her Life on the Sea Islands, published by the nationally circulated Atlanta Monthly in 1864, helped shape Northern public sentiment towards efforts to aid the newly freed. Reconstruction saw a recovered Fortin continue writing, teaching, and working for freed people in a range of settings. She taught in Charleston, South Carolina in 1871 and 1872, and in Washington, D.C. in 1872 and 1873. Her move to Washington led her to apply to the U.S. Treasury, which appointed her as a first-class clerk in 1873. She held this position relatively rarely among African-American women for 5 years. She also met the Reverend Francis Grimke. They married on December 19, 1878, soon after Grimke received a charge at Washington's 15th Street Presbyterian Church. The marriage was a happy one, though was marred by the death of their only child, 6-month-old Theodora Cornelia, on June 10, 1880. Charlotte Grimke was an active leader of church women and of broader community efforts. She also found time to write, and her notable publications from this period included letters on race and equality, published by the Boston Commonwealth and the Evangelist, and a remembrance of Whittier, published in the New England Magazine. In 1896, Charlotte Grimke was a founding member of the National Association of Colored Women, a major organization engaged in activities from the struggles against lynching to the fight for equal education. Grimke's final years, though, were marked by return of old ailments, and she spent almost all of her last years confined to her bed. She died at her home in 1914.
Josephine St. Pierre was born in 1842, the sixth child of parents who were affluent and well-connected, a part of the small African-American community who lived in Beacon Hill in Boston. The community in which she was raised was steeped in the abolitionist ideals and rhetoric of Boston's anti-slavery movement. As a schoolgirl, Josephine went to the integrated public schools in Salem, miles away from her Boston home, because Boston schools were racially segregated. In 1858, at the age of 16, she married George Ruffin. The couple immediately moved to Liverpool, England, in protest of the Dred Scott U.S. Supreme Court decision, which further entrenched the legality of slavery. 6 months later, they made the decision to return to the U.S. to work on anti-slavery and then to support the Union in the war. 5 children were born to the Ruffins: Hubert, Florida, Stanley, George, and Robert, who died in infancy. While working as a barber, George trained as a lawyer and was the first African American to graduate from Harvard Law School in 1869. He went on to have an active political career and then to become the first African American judge appointed in Massachusetts. In those years, Josephine was a member of several organizations doing charitable work and advocating for African American people. In 1886, George Ruffin died. To help with family finances, Josephine began to write for the Boston Current, an African American newspaper. She worked with white women on suffrage, but began increasingly to turn her attentions and efforts to the unique issues faced by African American women in the United States. In 1893, she started the Woman's Era Club, a Boston organization for African American women, and became its president.
Good afternoon, ladies. This organization of colored women means so much to me. Through it, our women are brought more closely in touch with the world and the great questions of the day. By this organization, not only are their own minds and talents strengthened and developed, but they are enabled to give a helping hand to those less favored and less fortunate. And through it, the inspiration of congeniality is felt. Besides this, each colored women's organization is a strong factor for the general elevation of the entire race.
The next year, Ruffin founded a new journal, also called The Woman's Era, the first ever publication for African American women. It included self-help content, literary news, social news, and also editorials written by Josephine and her daughter Florida, which addressed local and national issues of concern to African Americans. The publication put African American women and their concerns front and center, and followed what was at that time the bold practice of including small photos of Ruffin herself as publisher and of the authors of the individual pieces, making a statement that they had a role to play in the public sphere. By 1895, Ruffin had called for a national conference of African American women's clubs. At that first gathering of women's clubs from many different states, she delivered the opening address.
For far too long, our women have been unjustly silenced. It is time now to break the silence, not by noisy protest of what we are not, but by a dignified showing of what we are and hope to become. That we are impelled to take this step and to make of this gathering of colored women an object lesson to the world. Our movement is a woman's movement in that it is led by and directed by women for the good of women and men and for the benefit of all humanity.
From that conference came a national organization, with the Women's Era as its official publication. But differences in philosophy soon emerged, and many clubs preferred to focus on the domestic sphere, supporting education and self-improvement for African American women and children, uplifting themselves so that they would be seen as worthy of full citizenship. Ruffin's approach, while including self-improvement, was also public and political. The woman's era advocated for full citizenship for African Americans, decrying the horrors of lynching, even advocating for civil disobedience after the Supreme Court endorsed Jim Crow laws in the 1896 Plessy versus Ferguson decision.
It is an astounding proposition that a nation, a great nation such as ours, is unable to prevent the murder of its citizens. But it's powerful enough to stop moonshiners from making whiskey. But stop the white moonshiners. It won't stop them or anyone else from murdering its citizens. It is doing everything in its power to protect corn. But it cannot protect a human life. Now, it can prevent the sale of tobacco if the seller refuses to pay a revenue to the government, but it cannot and will not protect its citizens at any price. This, my friends, is reprehensible. This nation can go to war and spend millions of dollars and sacrifice thousands of lives to avenge the death of one naturalized white citizen who was slain by a foreign government on foreign soil. But yet, it cannot spend not 1 cent to protect a loyal, native-born, colored American murdered without provocation by a white person or anyone in the state of Alabama. This breaks my heart. It is shameful. Shame on such a government.
Ruffin withdrew from leadership in the National Women's Organization, leaving it entirely in 1899. The women's era ceased publication in 1897 due to financial difficulties. But Ruffin's work and the Boston Club continued with her as perpetual president. She went to a National Women's Club conference in 1900 in Milwaukee as a representative of 2 predominantly white clubs and Woman's Era Club. The conference refused to seat her in what became known nationally as the Ruffin Incident. She publicly refused an offer that would have allowed her to stay to represent the White Woman's Club only. 1910, she helped organize the Boston National Association for the Advancement of Colored People's branch. In 1915, she wrote an editorial for Crisis, the national NAACP magazine, urging African American men to support the vote for women.
Many colored men doubt the wisdom of women's suffrage because they fear that it will increase the number of our political enemies and overshadow our cause. But I have been involved in suffrage work in Massachusetts for 40 years or more. I was welcomed into the Massachusetts Women's Suffrage Association by the likes of Lucy Stone, Julia Ward Howe, Edna Cheney, and Abby Morton Diaz, along with other pioneering women, who thankfully were broad enough to include no distinction because of race and no distinction because of sex. We can't afford to follow after these women. And we are justified in believing that the success of this movement is a success for the equality of the sexes. In fact, it will help lead the way to even more progress toward the equality of the races.
When Ruffin died in 1924, her funeral was conducted at Trinity Church in Boston and was well attended by community leaders of all races. Telegrams celebrating her work came from across the country. She was buried at Mount Auburn Cemetery next to her husband and near many, many prominent reformers.
To heaven, gonna sing it, child.
No man cannot hinder me.
There'll be nobody there to put me out.
No man cannot hinder me. My Lord King Jesus, no man cannot hinder me. My Lord King Jesus, my Lord, no. No man cannot hinder. In that great and of morning, fairly well
Friends, we're going to take a 15-minute intermission. So let's come back here at about 4:20. We're going to reset the stage, rest our voices, and get ready for the second half. Thank you all for coming back so promptly. Before we begin, I want to encourage you again to consider the questions that we will think about during our community conversation. They can be found in your program. Which of the historical figures spoke to you the most and why? Because we have more historical figures coming up. How does this information change your perspective on our community and culture? And what does it call you to do? During the 30-year period between 1895 and 1925, Black people were still in the nadir, the lowest point in race relations, and continued to face disfranchisement. Jim Crow was the law of the land, and lynching of Black people was commonplace in the South. Over 2,000 Black people were lynched in the United States during these decades. In 1900, as the nation embraced the new century, at least 106 African Americans were victims of extra-legal, racially motivated killings. But Black life from 1895 to 1925 was marked by several key developments. The emergence of a robust national discussion among African Americans and sympathetic whites about the best strategies to achieve Black equality. The Great Migration and the Harlem Renaissance. There was a continuum of Black political responses to Jim Crow in the early 20th century. Booker T. Washington and W.E.B. Du Bois, along with William Monroe Trotter, were the opposite poles of the spectrum. Washington was a gradualist and asserted that integration would be best implemented and political rights obtained when Black people possessed economic power. The best way to obtain economic power was through vocational training and remaining in the South. Du Bois was an outspoken proponent of full integration and argued that without immediate political power, there would be no opportunities for economic advancement. He also argued that pushing Black people into a vocational education would create an endless Black underclass. Real emancipation, Du Bois said, required political power, civil rights, and higher education. Trotter also promoted an integrationist ideology. He rejected Washington's gradualism as being so slow as to be useless. And he called for immediate civil rights. He posited that without voting and political power in the political sphere, Black people would not advance in any meaningful way. By 1910, several national civil rights organizations were founded, including the Niagara Movement, the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, the National Equal Rights League, and the National Urban League. Marcus Garvey's Black nationalism and the Universal Negro Improvement Association offered political and organizational alternatives for African Americans throughout the nation by 1920. During the 1890s, 200,000 African Americans left the South and relocated to urban areas in the North. Approximately 2 million Blacks migrated out of the South to the North between 1910 and 1930, resulting in one of the largest migrations in United States history. Black migrants left the South to escape poverty, peonage, lynchings, stagnant wages, and the daily violence and indignities of Jim Crow. Natural disasters pushed some Black migrants out of rural communities. The boll weevil, a cotton-eating beetle that spread from Mexico to Texas in the 1890s and then throughout the South, devastated cotton crops. Floods in the Mississippi Valley during the winter of 1916 and in North Carolina the following summer damaged Black and white farms. New labor opportunities attracted Blacks to the North. Job opportunities in war industries expanded just as the immigrant labor pool began to disappear with the outbreak of World War. Northern industries were so desperate for labor that they dispatched agents to recruit Black workers from the South. For Black Southern men, the prospect of securing jobs up north that paid up to $5 a day proved to be far more attractive than earning 75 cents a day at the jobs they had in the South. Segregation in the North was enforced by long-standing custom rather than law. And as in Southern cities, Northern Black communities were distinct and separate from white neighborhoods. And Black districts were lively and self-sufficient, housing Black businesses, churches, social clubs, and organizations. One of these Black urban centers, Harlem, New York, became the epicenter of a decades-long artistic movement known as the Harlem Renaissance. Fusing literature with music and dance and visual arts, Black artists and intellectuals created a political movement that sought to capture the authentic uniqueness of the African American experience. The historian Deborah Gray White reminds us that, quote, the Harlem Renaissance promoted a more accurate and affirmative understanding of African American history and culture. And it also demonstrated the beauty and power of race-conscious art and enriched American culture. By the middle of the second decade of the 20th century, the new Negro movement was underway, of which William Clarence Matthews and William Monroe Trotter were proud members. Black people were more visible and had acquired more political and social power. Black veterans returned from World War I and wanted to make democracy a reality in America. Through organizing, lobbying, and protests, African American political groups became mass organizations and continued to lay the foundation for an outright assault against systemic racism to be taken up by later generations.
William Monroe Trotter was a newspaper publisher, a radical civil rights activist, and a critic of Booker T. Washington and his accommodationist approach to white racism. He was born in Springfield Township, Ohio, on April 7, 1872, the son of James Monroe and Virginia Isaacs Trotter. His father, who was a recorder of deeds in Washington, D.C. under President Grover Cleveland, was also an author of an 1878 book and a former Union soldier who had enlisted in the famous 55th Massachusetts Regiment under the command of Colonel Thomas Wentworth Higginson. William Monroe Trotter was a child of privilege, growing up in a mostly white neighborhood in Boston. In 1890, he graduated from the Hyde Park High School as class president and valedictorian of his class. In 1891, Trotter entered Harvard University, and because of his academic acumen, was elected to Phi Beta Kappa in his junior year, the first African-American student to do so in the history of the school. He graduated magna cum laude from Harvard University in 1895 and continued his education, earning his master's in 1896. He became a real estate broker, engaged in political activities for the Republican Party, and on June 27, 1899, married Geraldine Louise Pindell, known as Deanie. In 1901, Trotter and George Forbes, an assistant librarian at the West End branch of the Boston Public Library, founded the Boston Guardian, a weekly publication that gave voice to Trotter's opposition to the powerful sway of Booker T. Washington and that advocated in radical and aggressive fashion the full inclusion of African Americans into the American mainstream. Trotter and Forbes modeled their paper after William Lloyd Garrison's The Liberator, publishing The Guardian from the same building and even the same floor as The Liberator. Trotter published acerbic diatribes against Booker T. Washington and his accommodationist approach to white supremacy in the pages of the Boston Guardian. In one particularly sharp editorial in 1902, Trotter alluded to Washington's cowardice and labeled him a race traitor for making conciliatory remarks about Southern state constitutions that had ignored the 15th Amendment's prohibition against denying a citizen's right to vote based on race, color, or previous condition of servitude. On July 30, 1903, Trotter and a group of supporters disrupted a speech that Washington delivered at the Columbus Avenue African Methodist Episcopal Zion Church in Boston. By constantly heckling the speaker and shouting questions that challenged Washington's ideological stances, Trotter and the actions of his associates created a tremendous amount of chaos, which later became known as the Boston Riot. At the insistence of Washington supporters, Trotter spent 30 days in the Charles Street jail for his role in the affair, which both solidified Trotter's disdain for Washington and catapulted Trotter onto the national stage. In 1905, Trotter, W.E.B. Du Bois, and other prominent African-American intellectuals and activists founded the Niagara Movement. Trotter and Du Bois quarreled over tactics, with Trotter insisting that any national rights organization be led and financed entirely by African Americans. To this end, Trotter founded the National Equal Rights League in 1908. Despite his philosophical and tactical disputes with Du Bois, Trotter participated in the 1909 merger of the Niagara Movement with the group of white progressives from Springfield, Illinois, who founded the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, although he continued to vehemently oppose white involvement in the organization. A political independent, Trotter initially supported Georgia Democrat Woodrow Wilson for president in 1912. When Wilson's policies began to illustrate his commitment to segregation and disfranchisement, however, Trotter personally confronted Wilson with his concerns in the White House in November 1914.
Mr. President, one year ago, we presented a national petition signed by Afro-Americans in 38 states protesting against the segregation of employees of the national government whose ancestry could be traced in whole or in part to Africa as instituted under your administration in the Treasury and Post Office departments. We then appeal to you to undo this race segregation in accord to your duty as president and with your pre-election promises, we stated that there could be no freedom, no respect from others, no equality of citizenship under segregation of races, especially when applied to but one of the many racial elements of the government employ. For such placement of employee means a charge by the government of physical indecency or infection, or of being a lower type of being, or subjugation to the prejudices of other citizens, which constitutes inferiority of status. We protested such segregation as to working positions, eating tables, dressing rooms, restrooms, lockers, and especially public toilets in government buildings. We stated that such segregation was a humiliation, a degradation, entirely unmerited and far-reaching in its injurious effects, a gratuitous blow against ever-loyal citizens and against those many whom cited and supported your elevation to the presidency of our common country. At that time, you stated that you would investigate conditions for yourself. Now, after a lapse of a year, we have come back having found that all forms of segregation of government employees of African extract are still practiced in the Treasury and Post Office Department buildings, and to a certain extent have spread to other government buildings. We have come to renew the protest and to ask you to abolish segregation of Afro-American employees in the executive department. We have been sent by the alarmed American citizens of color. They realize that if they can be segregated and thus humiliated by the national government at the national capital, the beginning is made for the spread of that persecution and prosecution which makes property and life itself insecure in the South. The foundation of the whole fabric of their citizenship is unsettled. You said that your colored fellow citizens could depend on you for everything which would assist in advancing the interests of their race in the United States. Consider this pledge in the face of continued segregation. As equal citizens and by virtue of your public promises, we are entitled at your hands to freedom from discrimination, restriction, imputation, and insult in government employ. Have you a new freedom for white Americans and a new slavery for your Afro-American fellow citizens? God forbid. We are not here as wards. We are not here as dependents. We are not here for charity or help. We are full-fledged American citizens, vouchsafed equality of citizenship by the federal Constitution, separation and distinction because of a certain type of blood in our veins that is not made against different races is something that must be a humiliation. It creates in the minds of others that there is something the matter with us, that we are not their equals, that we are not their brothers, that we are so different we cannot work at a desk beside them, that we cannot eat at a table beside them, that we cannot go to a dressing room where they go. We cannot use a locker beside them. We cannot even go to a public toilet with them. Think of it, Mr. President, that any pedestrian walking the streets of the national capital, whether white or black, can enter and use any of these public toilets in the government buildings, and that Americans of color who are doing the work of the government cannot do so. Now, Mr. President, this is a very serious thing to us. We are sorely disappointed that you take the position that this separation itself is not wrong, is not injurious, is not rightly offensive to you. You hold us responsible for the feeling that the people of color in this country have, that segregation is an insult and an injustice, but not that that is in accord with the facts. Mr. President, Mr. President, we cannot be respected by our fellow citizens if we are to be segregated by the federal government. Our plea to you, Mr. President, from the bottom of our hearts, is not to have the federal government make concessions to the prejudices of anybody.
In 1915, Trotter organized boycotts and demonstrations against D.W. Griffin's racist film, The Birth of a Nation. Trotter led more than 1,000 people in a march on the Massachusetts State House in opposition to the film and its glorified depiction of the rise of the Ku Klux Klan. Since the founding of The Guardian, when they were newly married, Trotter's wife, Deanie, had been his committed partner at the newspaper, managing the newspaper's finances and dealing with the ins and outs of actual running the Negro Weekly. The couple had no children, with Trotter maintaining that the newspaper was their child. In 1918, the Spanish flu ravaged Boston neighborhoods, fell entire blocks, and claimed the lives of 100 million people worldwide, including Geraldine Trotter. For the next 5 years, Deanie's portrait regularly appeared in The Guardian with a vow to continue the work for which she made such noble and total sacrifice. In 1919, Trotter announced his intention to attend the Versailles Peace Conference to push for the inclusion of a racial equality clause in the peace treaty ending World War I. When the US government denied him a visa, Trotter took a job as a ship's cook to secure his passage to France. In the decade between 1920 and 1930, Trotter became increasingly radicalized and was actively involved in the Scottsboro, Alabama case and petitioned for the release of soldiers involved in the 1917 Houston Mutiny. Hit hard by the Great Depression, Trotter lost control of The Guardian in 1934. He died at the age of 62 on his birthday, April 7, 1934, when he fell from the roof of a 3-story building in Boston.
William Clarence Matthews was born in 1877 in Selma, Alabama, the youngest of 3 children of Elizabeth Matthews, a seamstress and housekeeper, and William Matthews, a tailor. In 1893, at the age of 16, William Clarence Matthews enrolled at the Tuskegee Normal School, led by Booker T. Washington. At Tuskegee, Matthews was a prominent athlete as well as student, coaching the football team and as captain of the baseball team. With the recommendation of Mr. Washington, Matthews was admitted to Phillips Academy, Andover, in the fall of 1897 as a prep student with a reputation as an athlete and already experienced in public speaking and team leadership. He was one of 5 black students in the school by his senior year. With a reputation as, quote, the best preparatory shortstop in the country and certainly the best all-around player that ever wore an Andover suit, Matthews entered Harvard in the fall of 1901, quote, making one of the strongest bids for quarterback on the Crimson 11 that has been made by any freshman player in many years, according to one press report. While Matthews' prospects on the football field were strong, it was his baseball playing that earned him greatest renown. Harvard was known for having the best college baseball team, and their games with chief rival Yale drew national coverage. It was in his freshman year, while already a football player of note, that he would score the winning run in the 9th inning of the game against Yale before 10,000 screaming fans and reported on by the New York Times. Matthews would remain on the Harvard lineup for the extent of his time at the college. His batting average was the top of the 1903 team, .344, and his plays and versatility on the field would lead to impressive win records for Harvard following his blowout freshman year, in which the team won 21 out of 24 games. In his senior year, he batted .400 and stole 22 bases, earning a poem dedicated to him in the Boston Traveler and being noted by the Boston Herald as Matthews, the colored shortstop of the Crimson team, came pretty near being the whole thing, his hitting being the feature. After devoting himself fully to collegiate sports at Harvard, he moved on to play in the professional Vermont Northern League for Burlington in the summer of 1905. While playing in Burlington, Matthews was subject to rumors which shook the world of baseball. In the July 15, 1905 issue of the Boston Traveler, it was rumored that the Boston Nationals were ready to scout Matthews to play in the National Professional League. This would have made Matthews the first man to integrate professional sports 25 years after the 1880 segregation of baseball and 40 years before Jackie Robinson.
I think it's an outrage that colored men are discriminated against in the big leagues. It's a shame that black men are forever barred from participating in the national game. I should think that Americans should rise up and revolt against such a condition. Many Negroes are brilliant players and should not be cut out due to their skin color being black. And as a Harvard man, I will devote my life to bettering the condition of the black man, especially to secure his admittance into organized baseball.
The opportunity to play in the big leagues never came. At 28 years old, Matthews returned to Boston in the fall and enrolled in Boston University Law School. 2 years later, he married Penelope Bell Lloyd, called Nellie, a former classmate at Tuskegee. Now an attorney in Boston, Matthews played for some of the North Shore baseball clubs. In or before November 1919, William Clarence Matthews became a member of the Boston division of the UNIA, the Universal Negro Improvement Association, the organization created by Jamaican Pan-Africanist leader Marcus Garvey. During a UNIA meeting in Boston on May 1st, 1920, Matthews would speak alongside Garvey as Attorney Matthews, Master of Ceremonies.
The UNIA stands as the name indicates, universal meaning, including the universe where Negroes live. It's the object of this organization to stretch forth its hands, to interest the Negro in himself, to raise and to build itself up within itself, by itself.
He tried to keep his comments brief and spoke chiefly of the Black Star Line, the ultimately unsuccessful commercial venture of the UNIA. The goal of the Black Star Line was to be a passenger and commercial freight liner operated entirely by black people to and from Africa, the Caribbean, Central and South America, and the United States. It was after this speech that Matthews would be named Assistant Consul General to the UNIA. Matthews would show up later that summer for the International UNIA Convention in New York City on August 4th. While he does not appear to have spoken, he appears as a signatory and one of the, quote, duly elected representatives of the Negro people of the world, with a main piece of writing to emerge from the convention, which was spoken by Marcus Garvey, entitled The Declaration of Rights of the Negro Peoples of the World. Matthews didn't stay in the UNIA for long. The Afro-American would report on December 30th of that year, reliable information has been received by the Associated Negro Press to the effect that William C. Matthews of Boston, Assistant Counsel General of the UNIA, the Garvey movement, has resigned his position. It is predicted that other honors will soon come to Attorney Matthews. Indeed, other honors were in store, as on the front page of the Dallas Express, dated August 12, 1922, Matthews' name appears below the headline, GOP Opens Western Headquarters, as one of the people organizing colored Americans for the upcoming election. Despite, or perhaps because of his involvement with UNIA, Matthews was being spoken of in the black press since at least 1920 as someone to organize and represent the Massachusetts Republicans. It seems that even though he had resigned his official position in UNIA, he continued to defend Garvey in court, even as he gained ranks within the Republican Party. As the 1924 election grew closer, the chair of the Republican National Committee appointed Matthews as the National Colored Republican Organizer. Following the election, William Clarence Matthews gave a speech which was published across the black press. Honorable William C. Matthews, National Organizer, expresses appreciation for cooperation of the group during the campaign and proposes a constructive program of action. He would outline 17 points similar to those he previously signed on to in the Declaration of Rights of the Negro Peoples of the World.
I would like to raise the following proposal as it pertains to inequities of representation of Negroes in the government. Number one, representation of the diplomatic corps. Number two, the establishment of stable representative government in the Virgin Islands by act of Congress. Number three, the appointment of an Undersecretary of State. Number four, the appointment of a Civil Service Commissioner. Number five, the appointment of Assistant Postmaster General. Number six, the restoration of the Office of Registrar of the Treasury to the race. Number seven, appointment of Minister to Haiti and a Consul General to Port-au-Prince. Number eight, appointment of Assistant Attorney General. Number nine, representation upon the Railroad Board of Review, Farm Credits Bureau, and in the Department of Commerce. Number 10, recognition of our women in the public service. Number 11, West Point and Annapolis appointments. Number 12, appointments in the Veterans Bureau and regional districts. Number 13, appointments in the Educational Department. Number 14, the 92nd and 93rd to be reallocated as combat divisions. Number 15, abolition of segregation in the government service. Number 16, approval of the librarian loan. Number 17, without attempting to determine the methods to be employed, we urge the government to take suitable cognizance of the crime of lynching in the United States.
In October of 1925, William Clarence Matthews was appointed to the Justice Department as Special Assistant to the Attorney General of the United States. Just 2.5 years later, while visiting Washington, D.C. on business, April 9, 1928, Matthews suffered a perforated gastric ulcer and passed away at the age of 51. His funeral was attended by 1,500 mourners.
I was born by the river in a little tent, oh, just like the river I've been running ever since. It's been a long time coming, but I know a change gonna come. Oh, yes, it will. It's been too hard living, oh yeah, but I'm afraid to die, 'cause I don't know what's up there. I don't know what's up there, oh, beyond the sky. It's been a long time coming, but I know a change is gonna come. Oh, yes, it will. I go to the movie, yeah, and I go downtown, and I heard somebody keep telling me, oh, you better not hang around. It's been a long time coming, but I know a change is gonna come. Oh, yes, it will. Then I go to my brother and I say, brother, can you help me, please? But he winds up knocking me back down on my knees. Oh, there've been times that I thought, oh, that I could not last long, but now I think I'm able to carry on. It's been a long time coming, but I know a change is gonna come.
Hello. Hey, before we open our discussion, I'd like to close our performance by introducing our amazing actors, our moderator, the narration team, and the Higher Praise Gospel Choir. Could you please hold your applause until the end? First and foremost, our illustrious moderator and advisor, Dr. Jaime Wilson. And if I remind you, can we hold the applause to the end? Thank you. Charlotte Fortin, Ms. Lynette Barnes, narrated by Mrs. Denise Wynn. Josephine St. Pierre Ruffin, Reverend Dr. Terry Ofori, and narrated by Robin Allison Lindahl. William Monroe Trotter, Mr. Ralph Bledsoe, narrated by Mr. Darnell Canada. William Clarence Matthews, Mr. J.T. Harold, narrated by Mr. Eric Lindahl. Musicians, Gerald Reese on bass and on drums, Amari. And last but not least, the incomparable Higher Praise Gospel Choir, directed by Minister Melvin Murphy. Thank you, performers. We hope you all will stay for our discussion, and I'd like to turn the mic back to Dr. Wilson to lead the discussion.
So I understand that some of the children may be restless, and that's fine. Some of the adults might be restless. So I'm going to give you a couple of moments, perhaps. If you need to leave, that's fine. But we do encourage you to stay for our community discussion. So you can just move around if you need to. No worries. Don't feel bad. So there are two mics coming around. Our conversation, it's not a question and answer. Dr. Wilson, what do you think about this? That's not what we do, right? It's a community conversation, and the questions that guide our conversation is, which of the historical figures spoke to you the most and why? How does the information change your perspective on our community and culture? And what does it call you to do? So if you have something to share, please raise your hand. Be patient, the mic will come to you. Don't be shy.
Sure.
It's on. It's on? Okay. The deer in the headlights thing is real. I have no idea what I'm doing right now. But the idea is what was intended was that everyone here was given a quick glimpse as to what was happening in the early 1800s. But more importantly, in the typical style of theater, you were brought in and you witnessed and you heard the voices of reenactors who were there only to bring you a feeling of what they felt, what they went through at their particular time on this planet. Now, if through the costume, through the powerful renditions that they gave, if you were transported to the early 1800s, give yourself an applause, because that was the reason. That was what they wanted. They wanted you to see, feel what was happening at that time. And if you felt that even for the briefest moment, then mission accomplished.
I think the hesitancy may be that it's really hard to choose one. So I'm just going to say that I was amazed to hear the speech by Josephine St. Pierre Ruffin that she gave. I think it was the 1897 speech, because I just felt like they were words that could be, you could be giving that speech today, Reverend Terry. And just the power of all these stories, and including all the persistence, but also the tragedies of their family lives that they endured, and they kept on going. So thank you. I just want to thank all the actors. It was amazing.
Hi. So my son his attention was definitely called by Trotter's entrance. But that speech that he gave to the president, that was so well acted, really similar to what Reverend Lee just said, just remarkable how similar it could be to some of the conversations today. And even though we don't have legal segregation per se, we certainly have economic and social segregation, and we still deal with it. And I think what is happening in our federal government particularly was just that speech felt very apropos, unfortunately.
I think we have a lot of work to do. We haven't finished. It's a lot of work to do.
Good afternoon or good evening. Looks like it's good afternoon. I guess I'll introduce myself. My name is Edward. I'm from New Jersey. I drove all the way up here from New Jersey. I'm going to put my relatives on the spot. Michele and Bill and JT, they are my relatives, aunt, uncle, and cousins. So I'm blessed to be in another branch of Zion, in the house of the Lord, and I'm here to not only support them, but I'm here to support the Lord. I'm here to support history. I'm here to support African American history. Now, one of the questions were, what are we to do? I'm going to paraphrase. What are we to do? You know, from the all of the historical figures that were displayed here. And one of the things I think as a people that we should do is continue to embrace love, no matter if you are Black, white, Spanish, Indian, Asian. I'm not going to go through all, but no matter your age, no matter your age, race, creed, no matter where you are from, embrace love. No matter your political party, embrace love. No matter what your history is, preserve history, African American history, preserve Indian American history, preserve Jewish history, preserve history, because that history is very much in danger. And our Lord and Savior, our God, is an awesome God, and more of us, more leaders, more church leaders, more people from our past, more people presently, the youth. If you have a voice, lift that voice. Sing, dance, petition, fight, write, because it's not looking good, as the gentleman over here said. It's not looking good, and we have a lot of work to do. The Lord is in control, but we need more soldiers. We need more lawyers. We need more speakers, more dancers, more. And when I say that, dancers, speakers, I mean we have to show up together. All these beautiful faces here, all of these races, all of these people here, stand up together. I love you all. Thank you for having me, and this was an awesome show. I am blessed that I've driven here, and I thank you so much for inviting me. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening, good afternoon. Presentation was amazing, and we learned a lot because there's a lot of information that was shared today that was really enlightening, and like somebody just mentioned, something that we're going through today. In other words, what I would like to see, these same presentations shared with our younger generation. As we look around, we don't have a lot of youth. Thank you. I love you. But we need more of our younger generations to hear this message, and we need to share it with them. And if you could, in some way or manner, take these presentations and share with them how they like to get their information through social media or something, have a live showing going on, I think it would be beneficial for them too. It was enlightening for me, and I know the younger generation would live the moment and realize that we're still living these moments today that these four characters lived 150 years ago. So if you could do that, it'd be amazing.
Hey, can I address that for the committee? Part of the grant that we got was to do an educational component of this. So we worked with the educator at the North Andover Historical Society, and the plans are to turn this presentation into education for our high school and middle school students. What? Yes, and also, this is recorded, and we will be publishing it onto our YouTube channel. Okay.
Hello, everyone. My name is Alan Wynn from Andover Baptist Church. I might get myself in a little trouble here. My wife was the narrator for Charlene Fortran, but I'm going with my brother Ralph Wentzel from Andover Baptist Church. And for that reason is William Monroe Trotter. And that brought me back to one of my favorite but very disturbing books, and that's The Color of Law, if any of you have ever read that. And it's a very, very disturbing account of how our government systematically, undisguised, separated the black Americans from the white Americans. And it states here also, too, that it was not only federal, it was nationwide, and it was local governments also, too. They actually went into these organizations, into these governments, into the buildings, and gave them incentives to separate black folks. They gave them money to build white-only communities. They gave them money also, too, to give incentives to put blacks in other areas also, too. It was very, very disturbing and sad when I'm reading and I'm in the book, to see why we're where we're at today, And it debunks the myth also, too, that all of these communities were built because of racism. No, our government came with inside of all of these communities nationwide and actually forced the people with money, with power and stuff to segregate us. So that's another big reason why we're where we're at now today.
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you. My name is Maia, and I just wanted to respond to the call to action question. As a graduate student at Harvard, I didn't know anything about these people and their connection to Harvard University. So I think a call to action is to further uplift their stories at Harvard, specifically for the black community, because I can only imagine their experience as being the one and only, and how it translates to some of the experiences our black students are having today. So I think sharing these stories will help comfort our community and make them feel even more empowered as they engage in their studies at Harvard. So my call to action, I would love to explore ways to integrate it into my Harvard community and to further uplift these stories in these archives. So thank you.
Thank you so much.
What did you study at Harvard?
What?
You said you're a graduate student. Oh, congratulations.
I'm just going to make one comment. I know. So last week we had the expert on William Clarence Matthews' life at the Historical Society, and that presentation is going to be published. There'll be links on the North Andover Historical Society website, but the Harvard Club was there and invited. So members of the Harvard Club were there, and also the Ivy League Championship trophy is the Matthews Trophy. So the Ivy League has recognized his accomplishment as one of the best baseball players of his time by awarding the trophy for the Ivy League championship in his name. So, and also, if you go down, one other thing I was telling Reverend Lee, there is a wall at the State House of women, prominent women in Boston, and Josephine St. Pierre Ruffin is on that wall. So there is some late recognition of some of these people. Ralph, did you want to talk? Okay. Okay.
Hi, my name is Kathy, and I grew up in Lowell, so I grew up in the melting pot of this area here, and I was very fortunate to be able to be with people of very different ethnicities and immigrants and what have you. But I think about the dates here, and it wasn't that long ago that my best friend here and I could not be sitting next to each other 100 years or so ago. We wouldn't be able to stand in the bathroom line together or go to Dunkin' Donuts to get a coffee. So it's just amazing what this changes have happened, but as Art said, there's still more to be done because we can work in the same place and sometimes not feel valued the same way. And there's more work to be done, and to be able to be with her as a friend. You know, we met in college together, and she helped me study, and I helped her study. But I couldn't have done it without her, and she couldn't have done it without me. So, you know, we need each other. We need to be united and be with each other, and, you know, just welcome everybody. You don't know what their past was, what path they're going to, but help them make their path easier. And you do it together.
Now, I found it very interesting that when I got the first tome of the script, like 40, 50 pages, I'm like, oh my God, how is this going to be interesting? I mean, really. But then reading through it, and especially hearing the narrators put voice to the message, and, you know, reading my bit and then finally working on it and crafting how I was going to say anything really made it something that I appreciate. You were excellent there. I mean, you just walked us right on through, you know? Last thing, I want to piggyback real quick on Deacon Wynn's comment about the court system. I have a best friend that prepped with me at Northfield Mount Hermon who ended up with his career in the New York City court system as a court clerk, court officer, etc. During the 90s, 2000, 2010s, not 20s, he's retired. But the bottom line I'm getting to is this. He knew of a lawyer that he would speak with, and they would bemoan the fact that these judges were giving harder sentences to the black people that would show up at the court. That lawyer became a judge and started doing it himself. And my friend went to him and said, "What's going on, man? You and I are on the same boat." Said, "I'm just doing what I'm told." That's America.
I think, is that, yes, looks like that's it for now.
Before you leave, before we are done here, thank you all for coming. I would like to say that. And I would also like to ask Sister Michele Phillips, our creative director, to come up and close out our program.
Thank you. Oh my goodness. Yikes. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, everyone. All praises be to our Lord and Savior, Jesus the Christ. Good afternoon, everyone. It's always a challenge being the last one up, standing between you and a meal or perhaps even the restroom. In the famous words of my Baptist family, I promise to keep it brief. As Reverend Blumel mentioned earlier, each February, during the month of February, we honor African American history with beautiful portrait banners around our town common. American trailblazers whose skin is dark. They are all from the Merrimack Valley and surrounding communities. Amazing people who, in spite of tremendous odds, brought their gifts and demands for change right here to our corner of the world. Many were first to speak up, first to speak out, first to organize, first to teach, first to be elected to local government and to the judicial system. It's undoubtedly my favorite time of year. I am often overcome with pride and a tremendous sense of belonging, which is a welcome and momentary reprieve from the odds that Black and brown folks continue to face. Just 4 years ago, I attended a program hosted by the North Andover Celebrates Black History Committee, a committee of two remarkable women, Tina Klein and Lynn Wentzel. With me made 3. 3, then 4. This year, we're up to 8 amazing, talented, and brilliant minds. We are grassroots for sure, meeting around one another's dining room tables or at one another's counters at our homes or at a local coffee shop to plan and to create. I'd like to introduce to you our small but mighty committee. If you could please stand when I call your name. Tina Klein, Lynn Wentzel, Pat Grimm, Gail Forsyth-Vail, Steve Vail, up top, Ralph Bledsoe, and Dr. Jaime Wilson. I'd like to also introduce our SAG-AFTRA members, Odis Spencer, Gilda and Chris James. We've been blessed by many, many people along the way.
Hey, that SAG means Screen Actors Guild, right?
Yes.
All right.
I'd like to thank the North Parish of North Andover for the use of their space and for the support from the Congregational Administrator, Stephanie Nolan. I'd also like to thank our North Andover legislative delegation who supported us in getting grant funding, with a special shout out to Representative Adrian Ramos. The town of North Andover for being our partner in the Banner Project, hosting our website and supporting all of our programs, with a special thanks to our town manager, Melissa Rodriguez. One final note. As you arrive today, you may have noticed on your way into the sanctuary a nice Goodwill donation box. The box is for those who wish to support the North Andover African American History Committee programming. All programming is free and open to the public. Each donation is greatly appreciated and put to great use. I made a little mistake. Let me get back here. This year, Mass Humanities gave us the nod and awarded us a grant allowing us to expand our programming and research, which will be included, as Lynn mentioned, in the local school curriculum. I speak for our committee in saying that we could not be more proud of the performance that was held here today. There was so much heart and soul that went into it. Our sole objective, to share 4 lives, their struggles and contributions to our community and to the nation. The amazing performance that you saw here today also represent a number of cities and towns throughout Suffolk, Middlesex, and Essex counties, much like our historical figures. Each performer gave of themselves purely and with earnest interest and support, rather than individual gain or professionalism. We have been blessed to work with such an amazing group of individuals. I thank each of them from the bottom of my heart. There are so many others that played a special part in making this production possible today. I would especially like to thank the lead of my life, my Lord and Savior Jesus Christ, my beautiful family, near and afar. Our astute researchers, Dr. Jaime Wilson, Gail Forsyth-Vail, and David Blauvelt. Our fantastic costumers from the Acting Out Theater Company, Linda Schoonmaker and Norah Moore. There is another person that I would like to recognize today, and I had a note, but I don't have it, so I'm going to speak from the heart. Okay. One day, I blurted out, "What are we going to do?" Let's bring them to life. Little did we know that would require a lot of work. There is one person that raised their hand and said, I will walk with you. I believe in you. I trust in you. And we've had a lot of good days and very few bad days. If any of you know me and have worked with me, you know my mind goes a million miles an hour. There's time when she's pulled me and time when she's held me back. She has amazing organizational skills. She's kind, she's loving, and I couldn't have done it without her. I'd like to recognize Pat Grimm. Lila, if you could come forward. She is my MVP. I think it's befitting of the Oscars. We got you an Oscar. This is my granddaughter, Lila. I'd like to show you something that's befitting of this time. I thank you all for coming, for staying, and safe travels home. God bless.